Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Peace Education webinar series. Thank you very much for joining us today, and thank you very much for your interest. And I'm very happy that you could be with us today. My name is Denise. I am the Communications Advisor at GPAC, and before we get started, I would like to introduce GPAC for those of you who are not familiar with our work, and then to introduce our speakers of today. So GPAC was founded in 2003 and is a member-led network of civil society organizations working on conflict prevention and peace building across the world. Our mission is to really promote a shift in how we deal with armed conflict. So instead of reacting to conflict, we want to prevent conflict before it erupts. But how do we do this? We work together with our members, and our members are local organizations based throughout the world. And we have 15 regional networks. So we cover the whole world. And together with them, we try to prevent conflict. We do this through focusing on different topics, themes, such as human security, gender, dialogue and mediation, and also peace education. Since 2006, GPAC has been working on peace education. Our members from all corners of the world have been working together to exchange information, skills, strategies on how best to engage and collaborate with key stakeholders in their education systems. And for this reason, they have formed the Peace Education Working Group. It's a very unique working group, bringing together civil society, teachers, academia, and representatives of ministries of education or other relevant government agencies to build the capacity of peace educators, teachers, and civil society organizations with the aim to integrate peace education into national school curricula, teacher training, and education-related policies and recommendations. And we're very excited because we have one webinar planned every month where our members share their expertise with you, share their lessons learned, what worked well, what didn't work well. And today we're joined by Edward Kingston Jumla, and he's a regional conflict analyst from West Africa Network for Peace Building, WANEP. And we're also joined by Josine Sombo, and she's a program officer, youth and peace education, also at the West Africa Network for Peace Building. So I would like to welcome Edward and Josine, but before I give the floor to them, if you have any questions, can you please save them to the end? You can ask them via chat, but you can also ask them by just asking it. And then we can have some time for discussion. So thank you very much. I now give the floor to our speakers of today. Edward, would you like to start?
Hello.
Hello.
Yes, so can you see my screen?
Yes, we can see your screen.
All right, okay. Okay, thank you very much. That was a great introduction. And I also want to say that we are very much excited to join this webinar today. And let me also start by thanking GPAC for putting this together, and also to our esteemed participants for joining. As you have heard from the presenter, my name is Edward Kingston Jumla, and I'm the Regional Conflict Analyst for WANEP, and I'm focused on organized crime and violent extremism. And my colleague, Josine Sombo, is the Youth, Peace and Education Officer of WANEP. Let me take a few minutes to introduce WANEP for some of you who might not have heard about WANEP. WANEP is a regional peace-building organization that works with various stakeholders at local, national, regional, and continental levels on issues of conflict prevention, peace building, conflict transformation, especially in the area of early warning and response mechanisms, dialogue and mediation, strengthening youth and women's participation at all levels of peace processes. WANEP coordinates its program through our member networks that are across the 15 countries of ECOWAS. And as you also said, we are also a member, in fact, a founding member of GPAC. Today, our presentation is going to be in two folds. One, I will talk about violent extremism and terrorism and why at the level of WANEP, we are beginning to see the trends and the dimensions that the West Coast is also threatened. Now that I mean the West Coast of West Africa. And after which my colleague will also talk about our peace education program, especially the development of curriculum that was designed to respond to this growing trend in the region. I will quickly talk about violent extremism. As you can see, violent extremism is a very fluid concept. And it has no fixed definition because it is not context specific. It depends from the position or the policy or response actions that you want to take. So therefore, violent extremism or terrorism could mean different things to different people. Just like you see a faceless individual on the slide there. It shows that violent extremism has no boundaries, it's not time bound, and it does not care whether you are young or old, male or female. The bottom line is, it is meant to disrupt smooth governance processes. It is meant to also pose threats to humanity and, of course, territories. So violent extremism, as I said, has no specific definition. And it can mean different things to different people. So for example, if you are from a government intelligence agency, you might be looking at persons of interest whose behaviors are inimical to society. You might be looking at persons with gun carrying capacities. Maybe if you are from a peace building organization, you might also be looking at it from someone who terrorizes or ring terror on communities and kill innocent people. So it depends on really the angle from which you want to define the concept from. But also, from a broader perspective, we can situate the discussion around a political ideology, especially when you talk about the conceptual framework, how issues around governance and strengthening institutions or weak state institutions could also play a role in that. Or issues around ideology, whether a particular group of individuals or individual wants to use ideology to perpetuate mayhem. Or from a perspective of religion, whether you are doing what you're doing in the interest of protecting or redeeming the image of a particular religious group or sect. It could also be discussed within the concept of social ideas, whether you want to protect your cultural values or belief systems or norms. and of course, from the economic point of view as well. So it depends on the motive of the individual or the group. You can be indoctrinated into violent extremism through any of some of these concepts. Now, in terms of West Africa, which is our focus for this discussion, we have seen violent extremism rising in the region, and the map I just presented shows a shaded yellow area, and you can see some arrows actually pointing at the hotspots in the region where we experience violent extremist attacks. And in fact, even how it flows through from one country to another as a result of porous borders, as a result of some of the other vulnerabilities in those countries. If you look at Niger and Mali, you see the proximity, you see the closeness, you see that a lot is happening along the border with Niger and Mali, and there are a lot of crisscrossing in terms of terrorist movements, especially groups like Al-Qaeda in the Islamic Maghreb or ISIS in the Greater Sahel region. Have a lot of activities going on along the border, and those activities are also being implemented or rolled out in Burkina Faso, which is the current subject of discussion at the moment. Because the rate of attacks in Burkina Faso is worrisome. It's the latest battleground, and we have seen violent extremists move from the northeast border of Mali and Niger into Burkina Faso. And the shaded point you see in Burkina Faso shows how also the threat in Burkina Faso is moving southwards into areas that were not initially having violent extremist activities. There are regions, for example, like the central region in Burkina Faso, which is a new ground for terrorist activities, and they are moving southwards. What that means is that the threat is eminent in countries that the Burkina Faso borders with, like Ghana, Togo, and Benin. So in this respect, there is the need for an urgent action in terms of what should be done to ensure that this movement does not engulf the entire region through access to the coastal area. But very soon I will talk to you about why is it important for that action to be taken and some of the vulnerabilities that exist in the region. But let's just dive a little bit more into this whole issue of how do we figure violent extremism out in this part of the world. The image you see on the presentation, let's take it that you have an arrow which is on your left-hand side. Take it as the y-axis, and then of course the arrow going right as the y-axis. And between the x and the y-axis, you have some images, white and red images, which actually represents the communities, the local communities, where conflict resides. And in these communities, you have youths, you have people who are mostly underserved, very difficult to reach societies, and of course, that also have their own peculiarities, their own local conflict issues, whether you call it low intensive conflict or they have full-blown conflict. But however, we have communities that are already vulnerable to the threats, and you have people who are there. And you notice that there is what we call the push factor to radicalization, because terrorist groups need these people to perpetuate their ultimate goal, which is to cause mayhem and destruction. So there are things at the local level or local community level that push people to be radicalized. And some of these things may include probably lack of economic opportunities, which of course is poverty, issues of unemployment or even underemployment for youths, and of course issues around marginalization, exclusion from governance, human rights violations, widespread issues of corruption. Of course, all of these issues throwing back to the fact that these communities are cut off from the seats of power or from governance. In most instances, they are far from the main governance areas. Some of them, even their routes are so difficult to get to those communities. But terrorists brave all those terrains, know that these people are easy to be indoctrinated. So they find them, reach them, and get them to do what they want. So those push factors. Also, there are what we call the pull factors. The pull factors, and they also include issues around. Let's talk about people who want to seek revenge for maybe something which has happened, or for some human rights violations that happened some years ago or some time ago, or issues around power alternation, or issues around failed promises from state structures, or people who want to safeguard or respect religion, or people who want to also use, just as I said earlier, some of those concepts which I explained about the social or economic reasons. At the community level, because they are far-fetched, they are far removed from the sources of power and even from resources, they are easily and negatively be indoctrinated. And when they are indoctrinated, what we see, of course, the risk will be very latent, and the risk would now be manifested into what we refer to as extremism, going the extreme for what you believe, for the ideology that you hold, for the religion that you want to respect, for the norms or culture or tradition that you want to keep, or for revenge that you want to seek, etc., etc. And in that context, of course, that leads them to terrorism. Now they want to manifest what they believe through violence. But also at that level, you have the counterterrorism strategies. And it's also at that upper level that a lot of resources has been committed. And at that level, you also have different mechanisms, multilateral, bilateral arrangements, especially in terms of addressing or countering violent extremism, especially with the use of an opposite reaction force, whether a military force or a military intervention, to be able to address the problem. So you see a lot of fuss coming in that direction. But that is not where we want to concentrate as a peace-building organization. We actually want to look at this area where you have to talk about peace education. And that is why UNEP Peace Education Program is designed specifically to address some of these challenges and vulnerabilities that we have talked about. So instead of all efforts channeled towards negative energies, negative indoctrination. Peace education brings in the aspect of the positive indoctrination, changing the narratives, getting to the communities, letting them understand that they have a charge to keep and that they have a community to protect. So my colleague will later talk about that and what we have done in that direction. Now back to the drivers and why the region is so volatile and vulnerable. One of the push factors we have identified is abject poverty, widespread poverty. And in those countries where the threat is imminent, in Nigeria, in Mali, in Niger, in Burkina Faso, for example, most of the people or the population in those areas subsists on less than $2 a day. And when these people are exposed to that level of poverty, level of rejection, they cannot find for themselves, what would happen? Any unscrupulous individual can step in and provide the alternatives, and we'll be able to get them to join them. UNEP did a research in 2017 on these countries on violent extremism and the dynamics. And I think one thing that came out very clearly was how violent extremists exploit the vulnerabilities of poor people in those communities, in rural communities, in underserved communities, where they can come with microcredits for women, for example, and get them to pay off with time. And if they're not able to pay, they can either bring in, donate or recommend their children or to be part of the group, to be able to remedy the debt, or they themselves join the group for fear of being pulled out by the extremist groups. We have that research also exposed issues around youths being given mobile phones, electronic gadgets, just because they want to be in touch with the international world. They need it. So they are being conscripted into violent extremist groups. In Nigeria also, for example, we have seen where the Islamic State in West African province, ISWAP, how they are also using local community development projects to also control the areas that they cover or they have seized. And doing that, they continue to gain confidence and trust from the people. And what that means is that they will, of course, be able to get more of them to join the crusade. But also, issues around low human development is also very important to note. And you look at the last Human Development Index report published by the United Nations in 2018. Nigeria is ranked 157, Mali 182, Burkina Faso 183, and Niger 198 out of 198. So in Niger, even in the least low human development index, they are also even at the bottom of the low development index. So translate that into what life means for people in those communities. And with slightest opportunity for somebody who can come with few dollars or few safers, can get them to join. Also, in this region, you see that we have very vibrant population, young people, youth. And according to ECOWAS data, we have over 3 million people in West Africa, all 15 countries put together. And 66% is made up of the youths. And mostly these youths are unemployed or underemployed, particularly the female youths. What this means also for a region with such very vibrant population? We need to ask those questions. If they are not positively or creatively being utilized so that all those positive energies are translated into development of their communities, they will use them, they will use the negative energies to destroy their communities. And of course, now you can see that they are even transcending borders, moving from one country to another. We also have what we call human rights violations and abuses. And what pushes people to also join these groups are also to even restore dignity, because the human rights at some point have been violated. And even if you look at the approach that we currently use in the region to even address this, it also has some human rights implications. If you go into a community and you suspect that there are collaborators, or there are terrorists, or there are cells, deeper cells around, and you want to fish them out, and you decide to just summarily execute people, those people will not sit and clap for you. No. They'll also be looking for ways and means to also attack. So it's less opportunity to get, they will join groups. Issues around illiteracy is also very rife in our region. People are less, low level of education is a critical problem. And then issues around religious literacy, because we have noticed that the cloak that some of these groups put on, or the face they put on, they present, is a religion, and a particular set of religion. But if you look at some of these groups and members of these groups, some of them, they cannot even recite passages in some of their books. So you want to say it's religious? It's a cloak. It's somebody behind a particular faith using religion to gain sympathy. Issues corruption is also very rampant in some of the countries, and you can see their ranking by the Transparency International's Corruption Perception Index. On the screen, you can see Burkina Faso is ranked 85th out of 180 countries. Niger, 120, Mali, 130, Nigeria, 1, and they are all doing badly in terms of fighting and combating this scourge, corruption. Bad governance, as I said earlier, weak state institutions are all contributing factors. Women who are known world over to be activists for peace, they are not included in governance. They are marginalized at some point. So how do we talk? How then we talk about combating violent extremism for even excluding people, and especially a particular important group like women? Absence of governance, state governance in some of the territories, especially, for example, in northern Mali, we have communities that are not that communities that do not have state presence. No governments, the people there are on their own, terrorists are doing their own thing, and so on and so forth. That's the kind of region that we're talking about, some of the ungoverned spaces that are within our region. And of course, issues around lack of confidence in states and democratic institutions, and issues of around dwindling trust in governance, etc., etc. So in terms of the pull factors, we have issues around sense of pride, sense of belonging, revenge seeking, access to weapons, and quest for heroism, access to material resources, defending religious doctrines, especially in terms of protecting heritage sites and so on. That is why even when terrorists go to some communities, invade some communities, they also attack even some of these heritage sites, because we have rich culture and heritage in our region. And also, what are the strategies? They use radicalization, as I said. It's a process, and the kind of process that they use to get people to buy into extreme views and eventually subscribe to violence. And of course, they use different strategies for recruiting women or even children as suicide bombers and so on. Issues around decentralization, networking, and even social media comes in handy because they use some of these strategies. They are well decentralized, they have developed and built caliphates over a period of time, and they built caliphates in some of the countries, and they are even now coalescing. They are forming coalitions to be able to be more robust, to be more powerful in their operation. And we have seen that also between the ISIS in the Greater Sahel, ISWAP, the JIM, JNIM. These are all coalitions now that we see also as a new dynamics in the region. And also the interface, also the kind of level of intertwined operation that we see between terrorist operations and even criminal groups, who also rely on some of these terrorists to also help them to have safe corridors in some of these places where they channel probably their drugs or armed deals or human trafficking networks. And then, of course, issues around politics of oil in the Lake Chad Basin. And we have seen various interests in that direction, where criminal elites in, for example, Nigeria or Chad are banking on resources from oil to also engage and support terrorists. So they will continue to support them so that they continue to have free access to some of these resources. And issues around financing for terrorists as well is also critical. And we have so many financial institutions spread across the region. And that makes it also very easier if the policies are not that robust enough. But from time to time, of course, terrorists beat some of these arrangements, whether they are stiff policies, but they also find ways and means to also channel resources, channel funds to their compatriots in other places. And yes, so let me just also, in terms of the context, in terms of humanitarian situation in the region, that also makes it very, very important to look at. Look at some of the figures. Countries most affected. Take Burkina Faso. 80 terrorist-related deaths in 2016 jumped from that period to over 1,800 in 2019. And the humanitarian situation is there. As you can see, the number of displaced people, about 25,000, as against even refugees, 560,000 refugees in just 2019 alone. In terms of schools destroyed, see the figures, very, very, very alarming. The same in Nigeria, the whole 9-year campaign of Boko Haram, and of course now ISWAP, over 27,000 deaths and over 2 million IDPs. We see also about 22,000 people are missing, especially women and children in Nigeria because of terrorist attacks in the northeast. We have seen also where women and children, especially the girls, are being used as suicide bombers. And of course, over 480 cases of kidnapping across 36 states in Nigeria. Mali also has its own humanitarian issues. And of course, in Niger, you can also see the figures. And of course, the latest attacks were over 174 military personnel were killed in the region in Niger bordering Mali. So this is just a graph of the humanitarian consequences that I've been talking about. And you can see how the figures have tripled or even quadrupled, if you like. And the manifestations are many in terms of using armed violence, using issues around drug cartels and drug trafficking, and raising resources to finance their operations. And of course, a localized conflict like farmer-herder conflict is also taking a toll on the population as well. And that is predominantly in Mali and Niger. And of course, issues around human trafficking is also very prominent in the region. And these are all vulnerabilities that terrorists exploit. So why we are saying that there are implications for the West Coast? This map again shows you the blue portion, the Atlantic Ocean. And it's a very vast, wide area. And the Atlantic Ocean also is an area that is mostly ungoverned. And you have countries along the coast who do not have the capacity to man those areas. So that's why you find out that most issues around piracy happens around the Gulf of Guinea. And the level of that as well, the trend is also increasing day by day. And of course, you can see from the data that just this year, 2019, we have about 50% increment or rise in abduction of people who work in vessels. You see the increase in figures. And then also, it's also an area where, as I said, we begin to see refugee flow from one country to another. And the burden of that on the other country in terms of their budgetary allocations and all of that, and even in terms of how the limited resources like food, like water, like land, are all being competed for because of the high or the mass movement of refugees or influx of refugees and migrants in other countries. For example, like in Ghana, in the northern Ghana, now we have over 2,000 Burkina Faso migrants who are residents in the north of Ghana. And within that also, these are opportunities that terrorists can also use to infiltrate a particular country. And in Ghana, in recent times, we have seen where some arrests were made of alleged terrorists who were arrested with weapons in Ghana, in the territory of Ghana. And I think with also the political instability in Guinea, in Togo, for example, and the ongoing political saga in Benin, these are all critical issues that we need to look at. And that the area already is crowded, and there are a lot of things happening, a lot of issues around political, social, economic issues. So those disgruntlements, those kinds of frustration from the local people can also let them open, susceptible to violent extremist recruitments. Nigeria is the same thing. So we have seen all of these things come into play, and that is why we need to watch the coast very, very, very seriously. Because already there are a lot of things happening in the coast. There are a lot of issues happening there. The geographic importance of even this coastal line. If terrorists could get this coastal line, I'm sure they will cripple the economies of these countries. Because, for example, we have some landlocked countries like even Niger and Mali who are dependent on the seaports of Togo or the seaports of Ghana or Benin. So that is why it's important that more action needs to be done or be taken in that direction to be able to protect and secure the West Coast, and also try to ensure that we're able to deal with violent extremism in the region in entirety. So there are a lot of actions going on in terms of international efforts, from France, from Germany, from the US, and many other partners on the ground. Of course, have their own interest, but I'm sure everything put together, they are also trying to see how they can support these countries to deal with violent extremism and terrorism. And of course, you have a very important arrangement which was also put together, the G5 Sahel. And these are the leaders. And they are also working together, pooling resources, synergy to be able to deal with extremism. Even though the G5 Sahel also has its own disadvantages or weaknesses, but at least some effort has been done in that direction. We have the NMJTF, which is also another arrangement at the Chad, and includes Nigeria, Burkina, Nigeria, and other countries as well. And we have the UN strategy on countering violent extremism, that of the AU, and you have that of the ECOWAS. And ECOWAS has done a lot in terms of ensuring that they're able to put this scourge under control. And in a recent summit held in September last year, and of course a follow-up also in December, they also talked about how they will address this scourge as a region. And I think the strategy that they have adopted for 2020 to 2024 seeks to foster regional cooperation, information and intelligence sharing, border management, capacity building, and intercommunal dialogue, and even mobilizing resources for this. And I also want to underscore the fact that there are also many other multilateral cooperation, which I've also mentioned. But the downside is that we have about 18, which of course our research team has counted, 18 different counter-terrorism strategies in the Sahel. It's a great initiative, but I think it also has its own downsides, because the saying goes, too many cooks spoil the broth. So these strategies need to be aligned, and the effort needs to be put together to address all of this. And of course, at the level of ECOWAS as well, there are a lot of efforts going on in terms of implementing the ECOWAS conflict prevention framework to mitigate the radicalization of youth by violence and extremism, and even other conflict prevention arrangements. And of course, the effort done by civil society and local groups as well need to be recognized. And that is where one peace education program will come in. So at this point, I want to ask my colleague to quickly also talk about the intervention, peace education intervention, to address some of these vulnerabilities that we have identified over a period of time.
All right. Thank you so much, Edward. I'm trying to...
Okay, so I will stop sharing mine and probably try to project Julien's paper quickly so that we, okay, so she'll project.
Hello?
Hello, are you there?
Yes, we're here and we hear you very well.
All right, okay. So Josiane will present the peace education program and how it also helps to address issues around vulnerabilities of youth to violent extremism.
All right. So thank you very much, Edward. Hello, please, can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you very well. Please go ahead.
Okay.
You can go ahead. Yes, I hear you.
All right.
Yes, we can hear you.
All right. I'm trying to share my screen.
Can you see Josiane's screen?
No.
Not yet. I can only see GPPAC.
Not yet.
Okay, let me try and project it from my own PC. So what, can you see mine?
Not yet.
Not yet.
Okay. I think I have it.
Yes, let me click. Okay. Share. You've shared already.
Yes. Please, can you see my screen now?
Yes.
Yeah, I can see Edward's screen.
Not yet.
I can see Edward's screen here.
All right. Can you see it now? I've shared it.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
All right. Okay, so as my colleague, thank you, Edward, for the introduction and the content about violent extremism in the region. So we are now looking at how peace education can be used for peace building and also to address violent extremism in the West Africa region. So as my colleague mentioned it earlier, violent extremism is a very complex phenomenon with diverse drivers. He mentioned some pull factors and some push factors that also are used by violent groups to attract more, that also motivates young people to be involved in violent extremist activities. So some of them, as he mentioned, promise of adventure, power, and resources. I won't come repeat some of these things that have been said already. So we see that we have diversity in terms of drivers. So this diversity also let us understand that there is no common pathway to violent extremism. So you also agree with me that there is no one way or one pathway to also address the issue of violent extremism. And as we know, the traditional approach of addressing violent extremism has always been the militarized way, but researchers and practitioners have also come to understand that there is limitation to that approach. So there is a need to diversify the various approaches, and one of them is education. So how can we use education to address the violent extremism in the region? So as you know, education has been proved as one of the major critical development intervention for peace building and also a proactive and long way to address violent extremism. What does it do? It helps individual and communities to build resilience and also find solutions to challenge of violent extremism in their communities. And how can we define peace education, and how can peace education also be used for to address violent extremism? So we share the experience of OneNet, and you will see that peace education is a process. So the arrow on my screen shows that it's a process. So a process of doing what? A process of promoting what? We are promoting knowledge, and we are promoting skills, we are promoting attitude, and also values like love, respect, kindness, and all put together should lead to change at individual level. So a peaceful person should be able to also have a peaceful knowledge, peaceful skills, peaceful attitude, and peaceful values that will bring about change at individual level first. And once we have that change at individual levels, we are now able to also help prevent conflict at community level. So let's say in the school community, in the family, and at community level. So preventing conflict, overt conflict, and also structural conflicts. So when you look at some of the overt conflict and structural conflict, they also link with some pull factors and push factors that my colleague mentioned. So we see that peace education, of course, can also help to address some of the factors that draw young people into violent activities. So these sets can also help promote peace, like I said, at individual level, at intrapersonal level, at interpersonal level, and at community level. So what is OneF's transformation agenda to peace education? The OneF Peace Education Program has been launched in August 2000, but was effective in 2001. And we started in 7 countries as a pilot project. So those countries were prone violence countries, to see how peace education can contribute to also create a peaceful school communities and peaceful environments for young people and also children. So after a year of successful implementation, we were able to extend the program to the 15 ECOWAS member states. And today we have over 200 peace clubs established throughout the region with about 3,000 members. So our intervention lies on ECOWAS, come as a support of ECOWAS initiative on violent extremism and other mechanisms that exist, like the conflict prevention framework, and also the ECOWAS Council of Ministers of Education. They had a report whereby they called for the adoption of peace studies in schools curriculum in the West Africa region. And also our intervention relies on the 2250, which promotes young people participation. So through our peace education program, especially for the peer mediators, we create a platform where students can also intervene, can mediate some conflict that occur within the school environment. All right, so we seek to reduce vulnerabilities and focus on violence reduction. We seek to develop non-violence knowledge, skills, attitude, and values, and also harness young people agency, because we believe that they have that capacity. They are peacemakers. They are agents of peace, so we can value what they have already and also turn it in a positive way to change the narrative about youth, about children. So toward the inclusion of a teaching curriculum on preventing violent extremism in schools program. So what motivated OneUp to develop a curriculum on preventing violent extremism? So as my colleague gave the background and the context and the dynamic of violent extremism in the region. For instance, how young people are manipulated, how they are targeted as a group of recruitment by extremist group, and how this come to affect them in terms of their education and in terms of other socio-economic aspects. So in line with what I just explained, in 2014, OneUp convened a meeting, and it was an expert meeting. And the objective was to discuss this topic, the context of violent extremism and its implication on the future generation of West Africa. So OneUp raised that concerns about how this phenomenon is going to impact the future generation in terms of education and their personal development and the development of the country, of the region itself. So we had that first meeting and another meeting held in February. All this to plan the intervention that we aim to put in place. So the key outcome of the experts meeting was to share insight on current dynamics of violent extremism. And at this point, I'm seeing that it's very key when planning a curriculum to address violent extremism. It's very key to understand the context, in which violent extremist group operate and how they operate, their moody operandi, and also this will inform your strategy. That's why OneUp brought together experts from the educational system, experts from curriculum development and ministers of education, civil society organization, all this to have insight in terms of what is going on the ground, the specific context that will also inform specific intervention that we are planning to put in place in the various countries. So this background is very key. And another important thing that I wanted to raise, the collaborative approach. So we put together all the various stakeholders that are very relevant to also support the development of the curriculum, and especially for the implementation. The objective is to have their buy-in, because without their buy-in, the implementation phase will not have the success that we intend to have. And another key point of the expert meeting was to also draw up an action plan for the development of operationalization of the curriculum to counter violent extremism in the ECOWAS member states. What was the objective? So the objective of the curriculum is to groom a mass of resilient citizens. Yes, we want to breed the resilience of young people to violent extremism, extremist group activities, and through their good citizenship. So we want to promote a good citizenship, and we want to also support them in understanding the context, how they understand the context, what are the causes, and the consequences for themselves, consequences for their families, their communities, and how they can make informed and appropriate decisions that positively affect their life and that of their community. And another objective, specific objective, is to also build their capacity and help them develop appropriate strategies for preventing violent extremism in their environments. So the scope of the curriculum is intended to be implemented in Mali, Burkina, in Niger, and in Nigeria. And when you look at the background that my colleague gave, these are some of the key countries where violent extremist group operates, and it has a lot of consequences on young people. So the curriculum will be used by teachers, so it has been developed primarily to be used by teachers, but can also be used by other education professionals like school managers, policymakers, and development partners that are involved in preventing and countering violent extremism. So now let's look at the content in terms of the teaching material that will be used for our clubs and for the children. So we have three levels. We have the primary level, and which start from class 1 to 3, and then we have the medium level, and then the senior students. So what was the objective? So the objective for this primary level is to demonstrate respect for peers, teachers, family, and community members. So the teacher is supposed to help children understand the concept of respect and how they can also demonstrate that respect towards their peers, their teachers, and families. And the curriculum is also supposed to help the child express his sense of belonging to a community and strengthen its attitude of empathy, solidarity, and differences, and respect for differences and diversity in the school and family. So let's look now at the content itself. Sorry. Okay, so the themes, we have themes, content, and skills. In terms of themes for that level, I mean the primary level, class 1 to 3, we are looking at concepts related to violent extremism. So for instance, how they can understand discrimination, persecution, human rights, fundamental freedoms, violent extremism, tolerance, and intolerance. So the skills that we are expecting from the children is to understand the various concepts. So once we understand what is discrimination, we know how now to adopt an attitude that is not discriminatory. And another thing is factors that promote violent extremism. So we need to let them understand some of those factors, and also some factors that attract violent extremism, like contact with well-organized groups, violence group, like hate speech, and also membership in an extremist group, acceptance of promises, some of these aspects that can also push them integrate some violent extremist group. warning signs and indicators of violence and extremism behavior. So they are warning signs that will alert them, help them assess their own attitude, their own values, and their own perceptions. So some of them are breaking up with family or longtime friends, change of behavior, sudden possession of large amount of money. So these are some of indicators that they can look at within their community to see if there are some signs that are related to violent extremism and how they can also support in preventing violent extremist activities. We have some recent consequences of violent extremism. So in the curriculum, the teacher is supposed to also help them understand some of those risks and consequences for the children, for their families and their communities, and how they can support in preventing those aspects. And the communication also is key, how they should communicate with their peers, with their family members, and as a way to prevent violent extremism. All right, so we have the content for the junior secondary, class 1 to 3. So the objective here is to understand the phenomenon of violent extremism. So we see that maybe I will not go through all the various contents, but we see that from class 1, from the preparatory level to the primary level, class 1 to 3, and to the junior secondary level, we try to adapt the content and the approach based on the learner's ability to understand violent extremism. So for instance, for the preparatory level, we don't talk directly about violent extremism, but we talk about some of the factors that could also motivate someone or push someone into ways be radicalized, like discrimination, and also poverty, some of those push factors. So at this level, at secondary level, some of the key concepts are ethnocentrism, xenophobia, violent extremism, tolerance, and intolerance. So the objective is to understand the concept of this concept that I just mentioned and reject some of this, reject the concept. So we have, for instance, violation of human rights and violation of human rights. So how they can also value human rights and understand the importance of respecting everyone's rights. And other theme that we look at is factors that promote violent extremism. So you see that it's just a difference in terms of level and in terms of understanding. So we adopt the same process, like I mentioned earlier. So discrimination and blah, blah, blah. Okay, so warning signs, suspicious behavior, breaking up with family, sudden school dropouts, and sudden possession of large amount of money, change of attitude and behavior. And these are some of the signs that can alert them and have maybe take the necessary measures to prevent such violences. All right, so let me move on. We also talk about global citizenship, like culture of non-violence. How is it important for them to understand non-violence ways of dealing with conflict? As we say, we are all human. We make them understand that, yes, we are all human beings, and wherever we have interaction, yes, we have different opinions, we have different perceptions, and violence can occur. So, but how do we address it? How do we prevent violence in a non-violent way? So we mentioned some of these values that we promote: intercultural dialogue, interreligious dialogue, acceptance of diversity. So we made the child understand that we are in a community. So how does he appreciate other people in that community? How does the child value the point of view of his classmate and how so the methodology. So how are we going to teach that the content that I just presented? So we have a methodology, and for that we developed a teacher's guide. So it gives the teacher a set of tips that he has to maybe adopt in teaching the curriculum on violent extremism. And one of the approach that we adopted is an integrated approach. So what does it mean? The integrated approach gives the opportunity to the teacher to integrate some concept that we just mentioned into existing subjects. So we understand that the curriculum is not a stand-alone curriculum, but it has to be integrated into existing programs in the school. So the teacher should have that ability to do that, and also take into consideration the learner's development level and ability to assimilate the objective of the lesson. So there are some concepts that will be split into 2 lessons. So he has to now understand how fast the learner is able to understand, so he knows how to integrate the various topics one after the other. And another methodology that we adopt is the active and transformational pedagogy. What does it mean? So here we want a pedagogy whereby the learner is involved in the planning stage, in the delivery of the lesson and the assessment. So from beginning to end, the learner is involved in all the processes. And it's also another pedagogy that also help understand how the learner is able to apply the skills, apply the values that have been acquired throughout the learning process. The evaluation. So we adopted in our curriculum the self-evaluation, whereby the learner evaluates itself to see, where am I in terms of values, in terms of knowledge, in terms of attitude. Am I moving from a violent stage to a non-violent stage? So he has to evaluate, he or she has to evaluate himself or herself during the learning process. And we have the co-evaluation, whereby we encourage mutual evaluation among the learners. And we have the teacher's evaluation, which is also important to appreciate the progress, the transformation progress of the learner. What is the strategic intervention for the implementation of the curriculum preventing violent extremism? So we had the pre-implementation phase, and in our pre-implementation phase, we are focusing on advocacy to have the buy-in of relevant stakeholders that are key for the success of the program. So we are targeting relevant ministries, the Minister of Education and Defense, Security and Defense. We have to get the buy-in of schools, principals and administrators, also the buy-in of teachers, students and community members. And after that stage, we are trying now to move to the implementation phase. But before that, we have to set up a steering committee. So the steering committees will support the planning process, define a strategic approach in terms of the implementation, and also develop some tools, and also M&E plan that will help us assess the progress of the program, the process of the implementation of the curriculum. So in the steering committee, we are looking at school administrators as well as pedagogical experts and curriculum experts. So what we need to understand is that the curriculum is a guiding document. So at national level, the steering committees comprising of pedagogical experts and curriculum experts should now support in terms of developing pedagogical sheets that will help the teacher. Go through the teaching process. And in the steering committee, we have also at UNEP, which will be represented at the national level. We have NGOs that will be represented, and after that stage, we move to capacity building of teachers, which is also key for the implementation phase. Now the implementation phase will be the teaching of the curriculum. So I mentioned some aspect of the content that will be taught to our club members and children in the various schools. And we have the community sensitization. So the community sensitization will mostly focus on dialogue, because our approach is to bring about community solution to violent extremism, because we believe in community's capacity, we believe in their agency, how they can also use their values at community level, their structure at community level to help find a local solution to violent extremism. Okay, so I'm moving to the end of the presentation, and the key factor, some of the key factors of success in teaching the preventing violent extremism curriculum is: one, understanding the context of the country, the modus operandi of the particular extremist group operating in your target area. So I mentioned it earlier. And then the collaborative approach is key. We have various actors on the ground, and we need to understand what each other is doing. So if there are some ways to harmonize strategies, some ways to harmonize some intervention approach, is very important. For instance, in our case, we are working with UNESCO. UNESCO is implementing a curriculum of violent extremism in some of the areas, like in Mali, Senegal, in Niger, where we also intend to implement our curriculum. So we had that discussion with them to see how we can also build on our various interventions in terms of strengths, how we can harmonize our strategy, and also in terms of advocacy. Yes, we are all advocating for the inclusion of a violent extremism curriculum into existing curriculum. So we need to have a key message, because the same actors are ministers of education, the same actor will be meeting experts in terms of pedagogy. So we need to have a common, harmonize our message that we convene to those stakeholders. So we had that discussion, and we are working around it. What we are planning is to have a review session at the end of the pilot phase, because they are implementing a pilot phase of their curriculum, which will be implementing our pilot phase of our curriculum. So at the end of a year of implementation, we are preparing a review meeting whereby we will also see some of the successes and some of the challenges we went throughout the implementation phase, to also help other actors that will maybe later be involved in that field. Another key point is the planning stage, as I mentioned, with the steering committee, focusing on building resilience of children or youth and transformative pedagogy. Yes, as I mentioned earlier, peace education seeks to, So peace education seeks to have breed resilient people and who are also transformed. So the first milestone in peace education program is the transformation of the learner. So that's why we believe that the transformative pedagogy is very key in curriculum, in implementing a curriculum on peace education and also on violent extremism. The supportive the teacher's capacity, I talked about it, is also very important, because the teacher is the one who will be interacting with the children. He has to understand himself, then the concepts of violent extremism. He has to understand the the context in which violent extremist group operate. It has to understand this transformative pedagogy. That's why we planned training for our teachers who also have this competence and this orientation that will help them implement the curriculum. The supportive school leadership, this is very important. So when we are talking about supportive school leadership, we are looking at the regulation at school level. Some schools have some regulation, so it should be in line with what we are teaching to the kids. That's why we are talking about that, and we need their support as well. And finally, engagement with community. We are saying that children, the learners live in communities. They live first in families and they live within community. That's why in the intervention strategy, it's very important to include families, especially parents and also community members, so we all convey the same message that is taught to them at school level. So I think I'm at the end of my presentation. Thank you so much. And if you have any questions, I'm available.
Thank you. Thank you both very, very much for an extremely interesting, for your extremely interesting presentations. I'm sure there are many questions and I would like to open the floor for questions. You can either ask it via chat or unmute yourself and ask. But one point, there were some requests from some of our participants if we could share the presentations with them. If this is okay with you, then I can do so after the webinar.
Yes.
Yes.
Yes? Okay. Okay. Thank you. So any questions?
Hello?
Yes?
Greetings to you from Nigeria. My name is Rafiul Lawal. Can you hear me?
Please go.
Yes, we can hear you.
Yeah.
Please go ahead.
Yeah, my non-governmental organization working on peace building in Nigeria. First, I want to commend the two presenters for brilliant presentations. I think that this is one of the most interesting overview on this in preventing it that I've heard in recent times. So kudos to you both. I just want to say one or two things about what Edward said earlier when he was describing some of the causes of violent extremism in West and Central Africa. I agree with him totally that we have the push and the pull factors, which are basically triggers or inspirations for young people's participation in violent extremism and criminality. But with recent development, especially from the experiences that we're having in Nigeria, I think one would not be outrightly wrong to say that the cases, the rising state of violent extremism in Nigeria and in other, countries around may not, outrightly be connected to some of these push and pull factors. And what I'm trying to say in essence is that we've had, reports, evidences to show that, funding for violent extremists, sponsorship for violent extremist groups are tied to, foreign countries, are tied to, superpowers. So it brings to question again, the fact that the conflicts that you see have economic interests. I agree that maybe unemployment, poverty, the quest for revenge, reward may push young people to participate or take up, violent actions. But of course, these actions are inspired by interest of foreign nationals. And that is why it is saddening that the case of Nigeria, the case of Burkina Faso, the case of Mali, keep on, lingering. For goodness sake, this is going to be 10 years Nigeria has been tackling Boko Haram, any cure in the coming period, this crisis will linger on in as much as the interest of superpowers exists. Then secondly, I want to ask about the peace education curriculum that you shared. I see that some of these topics, for example, citizenship education, for example, tolerance and intolerance, some of them are already enshrined in existing curriculum in secondary schools, primary and secondary schools. In Nigeria, for example. Are we trying to set up a separate peace education as a subject in schools, or they will still, is it going to stand alone, or we'll just look for a way to merge some of these topics into existing subjects in primary and secondary schools? Then lastly, I hear that you talk about the peace education working group. I think that some of us are interested in it, and how can we work and support such group?
Hello?
Yes?
Yes. So it's over to us, right?
Sorry?
Yes. Should we come in or we take some questions?
Yes,
or we just...
Please go ahead.
Yes, I think I want to agree with the last speaker that the question is very clear and very important, especially when you look at the way in which extremism and terrorism, are actually taking foothold in our region. You begin to imagine what are some of the external driving factors behind some of these things. Are we only having internal actors? What about the external actors? What about those people who are interested in conflicts, who are benefiting from the economies of war? People who are behind some of these things just to make sure that they continue to gain wealth. Remember in the presentation, I spoke about politics of oil in the Lake Chad Basin. Yeah. I didn't go deep into it because there are some nuances that we need to unravel the more. But we have actually identified foreign interest in some of these things. So they are not only coming to help. That's why I said even too many cooks spoil the broth. How in a region like Sahel, we have 18 different strategies to address violent extremism. 18. And in addition to that, we have the national strategies from the countries, and we have ECOWAS strategy, we have US strategy, we have AU strategy. Why not come together if we are actually sincere and want to help these people, want to help the local communities, want to deal with violent extremism? Come together and align our strategies, pull our resources together and be able to address this scourge. But there are some elements who have interest in natural resources, the oil, the gold, and it will interest you. In northern Mali, those areas that are ungoverned, the deposits of gold, other precious stones that are in those areas. But you can imagine, you go to some of those ungoverned areas, you find some French troops there, but government is not available in those areas. So tell me, I'll lay it bare on the table for other participants to discuss, but there are certainly external influences and interests behind what is happening. And I think we have to underscore that. And I think in the region, we are beginning to see that come into play. In the research that I talked about that we did in 2017, the researcher points out that he had a testimony from somebody who was captured by Boko Haram and taken to Zambiza. And he was in the forest and saw military paraphernalias, hardcore military gears, vehicles, sophisticated weapons. Where are these people getting all of these things from? So these are to show that we have rogue elements who are behind some of these things to get resources and continue to better themselves. Even the role of Chad, Idris Deby, for example, has a role to play in some of these things that are happening in the Chad Basin. But yet still, we need more research. Research, of course, have been done, and we'll continue to do more research to be able to point out some of these foreign interests. And I think also the issue about arms. You know, already in the region, we can produce our own local arms. But I'm telling you, some of the arms that Boko Haram carry, or ISIS carry, or ISWAP carry, I'm telling you, these are not arms that are made by our blacksmiths. These are arms that are made from Europe or in the Western world. So those arm manufacturing companies want to stay in business. So that is why I said, let us continue to do our own efforts and try to address the situation, because they want us to continue to fight. The more we fight, the more they sell arms and the more they get rich. So the onus is on us as Africans. The onus is on us as to imbibe the African solution to the African problem. I think that is something which I think the African Union Agenda 2063 is also promoting, and also the aspect of silencing the gun, which of course 2020 we have started the year of implementation. So these are all issues which we need to look into as development experts or as people in peace and security. How do we ensure that we unravel those who are behind some of these mayhem in our regions? You see when, for example, some attacks happened in Burkina Faso. Quickly, ISIS claimed responsibility, some of the attacks, whether in fact they have direct link with it or not, but they claim responsibility because they want to gain relevance. So what is happening? Some of these splinter groups and sleeper cells that are being formed in the communities also want to gain prominence from ISIS. So what they do, they will continue to attack. So that's why you see the rising trend in attacks in the region. So let me allow my colleague to also talk about peace education, your question on peace education briefly. So this, my colleague from Nigeria, I wish we had a more personal talk on some of this issue about external influencers. Then you learn a lot and know what we know that is happening in those countries.
All right, thank you so much for the question. I think you were trying to understand whether the curriculum will be a standalone or will be integrated. As I've mentioned it in my presentation that it's not a standalone curriculum. It will be integrated into existing discipline. So that is the approach. But I said earlier in the background, we had this report of the ECOWAS Council of Ministers of Education, whereby they call for adoption of peace studies in school curriculum in the West Africa region. So for this particular curriculum, we are integrating concepts of violent extremism and other concepts that are related to violent extremism into existing curriculum, which is a very important step for us, because OneNep has always been advocating for the integration of peace education into schools curriculum. And when we rely on this commitment of the various ministers in the West Africa region, nothing has been done so far in terms of enforcing that commitment. That's why we are still advocating. Unfortunately, or let's say unfortunately, we'll be integrating the curriculum peace violent extremism in 4 countries. We are hoping to extend it to other countries as a way to integrate peace education study in school curriculum. So I think it's a very achievement. It's a very good starting point, and that will also help promote peace education in school curriculum. The other thing is the second question was about the working with the peace education working group. Yes, we need contribution. I mentioned in my intervention that collaborative approach is very key in addressing violent extremism and even any other forms of violence, because violences are operated or occur in a context. So we need to understand the context, and in that environment, we have various actors on the ground. So we need experts in education, we need civil society interventions, because some of them are focusing on addressing some issues related to violent extremism. So in various countries, so in Nigeria, you are in Nigeria, maybe when we get in touch with you, can get in touch with the national network when the time comes, and based on your expertise, based on what you have been doing on the ground, we can also appreciate how your contribution in that platform can also support the implementation of the curriculum successfully. So it's open, and we hope to maybe get in touch with you and also learn from your expertise. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I would like to go to the next question we have from Christina. She asks if you could please share with us when the curriculum on preventing violent extremism will be available online.
Yes, and I would like to take this opportunity to say a big thank you to GPAC, who supported the development of the curriculum. So we are very grateful for your support. And in due time, yes, the curriculum had already been shared with GPAC, but when the official documents will be launched, we will also share it with you.
Okay, thank you. And there will also be a launch with ECOWAS, correct? Later on in this year?
Yes, we are still planning that one. We are still reflecting on whether we should do it at regional level or to national level. And we think that it will be more relevant to have the launch of the curriculum at national level where the ministers are there, and we still have ECOWAS on board, because we have ECOWAS offices in the various countries where we can have them on board and also officially launch the implementation phase of the curriculum. So we'll update you on what has been decided and how we are trying to maybe strategically operate.
Great, thank you very much. We look very much forward to it. Now moving to another question from Dominique, noting that there is a link between violent extremism in the sub-region and religion, does the peace education curriculum provide a role or involve religious leaders? And what will it expect of them?
Yes, I think in the process of developing the curriculum, a wide range of consultations were done, and I think all those key religious leaders were also involved. And I think also WANEPA relationship with the high offices of Islamic Council, for example, in some of these countries, is very cordial, and from time to time, we continue to engage them. And it's certain that also, that not only this curriculum be limited to only the English school, but even I think we want to see if we can also penetrate madrasas and even solely other types of educational institutions as well. At least not even if in the implementation of the official pedagogy, but some aspect of the curriculum will be also rolled out in some of these places, because remember some of these in some of these areas we don't have schools officially operating in those areas. Some schools are operated solely based on by religious bodies. So they only teach in Arabic, for example. So we have to also go to those schools and let them also know that indeed there is something like this, and they were able to also imbibe them in their own learning system, which would be very much important. So we will not leave any stone unturned to get any religious leader on board to get this. Like, as I said in my presentation, this issue about violent extremism is no longer a religious affair. Certain people are now using religion as a front view to gain access to wealth, to resources, and all of that of power. So we have to try to also get their own side and get religious leaders on board to also rewrite the narrative.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Does anybody have any more questions? Okay, then I would like to thank you very much for your very interesting presentations and for sharing with us your expertise. It was very, very interesting, and I would like to thank all our participants for joining us. Just one point from our side, we record this webinar and it will be available on our website. And as agreed, I will also share with all the participants the presentations. And if you have any questions or any remarks, please feel free to get in touch with us. And thank you again very much.
Hello, Christina. Hello.
Hello?
Yes, Christina. Yes, I would like to ask if it's possible to share with us the name of participants and also have their feedback. I don't know if you are planning to have a questionnaire, so we also appreciate what they have learned throughout the process. And yes, so I think
I will follow up with you after this via email, but we've had quite some participants in and out also, and most of them also via chat are thanking you very, very much for an extremely interesting, some of even call it brilliant presentations. So I will share this feedback with you as well, definitely.
All right, that would be great.
Okay, thank you, and till next time.
All right, thank you.
All right.
Bye-bye.
All right, bye. Well done.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Yes, congratulations. Thank you very much.
Bye.